Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the City of Virginia Committee of the Whole meeting. This is our working session. We are streaming live on cable access TV. Welcome everybody who's in the audience and the presenters today. We ask your patience as we move through this rather fulfilled agenda we have moving today. I'll call this meeting to order. Today is, like I said, Tuesday, November 19th, 2019, and it's 9 a.m. Pam, would you please take roll call?
Baraboo.
Present.
Friedlieb.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Sally.
Here.
Huffy.
Here. One absent. Okay. Moving forward, we have a couple of changes in the agenda. There's been one presenter that won't be here today and be moved to the next committee of the whole agenda. But I'll turn the remaining part of the agenda over to our city administrator for moving forward with each individual project we have, our finance, street and alley, building and grounds, and personnel, and other items of concern. So I'll turn this meeting over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. First item on the agenda is we have representatives from NRRI and UMD here to discuss the continuation of the study regarding sulfate concentrations at the wastewater treatment plant.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Please come forward, and if you turn on the mic, just press the button. It's got to be green in order to move forward. Please state your name for the record, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Hey, thank you, Mayor, councilors, for the opportunity to present our idea to your council this morning. My name is George Hudak. I'm the director of the Minerals and Metallurgy Group at the Natural Resources Research Institute, which is located in Duluth. We're a research lab associated with the University of Minnesota. We're an applied research lab with the role of providing solutions that allow us to come up with solutions related to environmental resources for basically sustainable development of our natural resources and economic growth. What I'd like to talk to you today about is a project that we've been working on for the past 2 years through some funding that we obtained through the Minnesota legislature, which is to look at possible ways to treat wastewater that would fulfill Minnesota's very strict standards for meeting the wild rice standard, which is 10 milligrams per liter of sulfate in water. The drinking water standard currently is 250 milligrams per liter. Minnesota has these very unique standards because of our wild rice resources. If you go to typical conferences, you go to various vendors that do this type of work, people aren't really working on trying to hit this 10 milligram per liter because really the market is only Minnesota. So what we've done at the NRRI is try to understand this problem by doing some work related to chemical treatment of wastewater. What we've done over the past 2 years through funding gathered by the Minnesota legislature is to do some experiments basically on the bend scale to understand if we could use a barium sulfate treatment solution to try to see if we can get down to that 10 milligram per liter standard for the wastewater. We have used Virginia wastewater treatment water in that study before, and we thank you for that opportunity to collaborate on this study. What we found at the bench and in the pilot scale is that this seems to work. And as science goes, what you have to do is you do things on a small scale, get an idea if they work, and then you move to a larger scale and you see if you can implement them at that larger scale. So what I'm here today to do is to request the opportunity to continue our collaboration, to work on over the next couple of years, to work on a project which would enable us to do an experiment at your wastewater treatment plant, which would be a pilot study of the technology that we've developed to see if we can continue to get good results related to that 10 milligrams per liter water standard. What I'd like to do at this point is bring up the two technical experts that I brought with me, Dr. May Kai, who's an environmental engineer, and Dr. Adrian Hansen, a professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth in the civil engineering department.
Dr. Hansen, Dr. Kai, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor, councilors. First, one of the questions you might ask is, why us? And the reason why us is that you're a representative water of what's going on in the Arrowhead region. So if you look at the handout in front of you, we've got a map of the state of Minnesota, and it shows a range of, in that green circle, of 50 to 150 milligrams per liter, but most of your neighbors and you are all around 50 to 60 milligrams per liter of sulfate. We thought about our friendly neighbor in Duluth, but they're at about 400. And they've got some really weird things going on at their treatment plant, being nice about it, but they do, because they've got two paper mills that come in there, and those two paper mills have very different processes, and they discharge at different points. And so we've used their wastewater to blend with yours to get different concentrations, and every time we do, it's an adventure. So rather than have a continuous adventure as we move forward in this, we thought, let's go to a nice, stable, well-behaved, and your operational staff with your treatment plant generate a really nice, consistent, well-behaved wastewater effluent. So from our perspective, this makes it really nice. And if you look on the second page of the handout, this is the process flow sheet that was done theoretically. And the theory here was really put together by May and some others working together as a team. And then working with them, I built the bench scale pilot that's on the third page. And it's got some reactor tanks and some flocculator tanks and some clarifier tanks and a filter. And you know what? That's not too different from what you currently have out at your treatment plant for removing biological material. So what we would like to do is to bring in a pilot, set it next to your effluent pumping, and take out of your 2,000 gallons a minute, take two, run them through our pilot, and see what kind of a performance we can get. If you look on the very last page, you see that very first set of bars on there that show a little short brown bar and a tall blue bar. That's your wastewater. That's 60 milligrams per liter. And we worked with your wastewater and nothing else for about a year. Not a year, probably 2 years.
Yeah, already.
And then once we were comfortable that we knew that we could consistently get below 10 milligram per liter with your wastewater, we started blending in some of WSSD's wastewater. Like I said, everyone was an adventure. But you can see that we consistently treated it down to the state standard. But that was at a really, really, really low level. That was at 100 to 200 milliliters per minute. So we're going to up the scale about 20 times and then see where we're at. Because we feel like if we can do that, if we can do the calculations at 200 and we can do it at 2 gallons per minute, then we start to get a relationship that we can scale up and figure out what will happen at a full-scale treatment plant. So next step is that picture on the trailer. That's about the scale that we're looking at for what we bring in, park next to what are your old chlorine contact chambers, pump out of your backwash tank, and then we would treat that water for sulfate. Right now it's treated for everything that's in your permit, but MPCA would view this as kind of like just a little side experiment. We would pull it out of there, treat it, and then see how well we can do with that higher flow rate on a continuous basis.
Okay. Do you have a question? You can go ahead.
Ask.
Oh, no,
Okay.
please continue, thank you.
Yeah. So maybe you have some concerns about the impacts on water quality and water quantities. So for the Virginia wastewater treatment plants, the flow rate is around 2,000 gallon per minute, and our test is 2 gallon per minute. So basically, it's 0.1% of water will be used in the pilot system. So water quantity should be okay, I think. From water quality part, we will work with the MPCA for the water quality standard for the discharge, where should we discharge, or do we meet the discharge permit? We definitely will work that. And another one is the waste. We probably produce some sediment. We will store the sediment in some 50-gallon tanks first. Then we'll characterize and work together with the MPCA to see how to discharge the waste. We will not discharge in the wastewater treatment plant for sure. Can you ask?
I have a few questions before we move to the rest of the councilor. First of all, my concern comes from the involvement in the MPCA. Our track record with the MPCA has not been very good. They've been, for the most part, very difficult agencies in which to work with. So my question to you first is that have you been in contact with the MPCA in your previous endeavors with our wastewater treatment plant?
Yes, and some of your operational staff came to a presentation we did last spring where we presented our results for our first pilot activity.
Right.
And at that, we had about 4 of the MPCA staff there. At that point in time, we asked them if going to a treatment plant scale pilot would cause them any heartburn. And they indicated that they would view it as a positive step and as an experiment, not as modifying your treatment. And that when they said not modifying your treatment, that's kind of a big deal because if we modify your treatment, then all of a sudden your permit's got some problems.
Right.
So they said, no, this is an experimental activity, and they would view it as such. And we would keep them apprised of what we're doing. I don't anticipate that you're going to have any negative feedback from them.
Okay, very good. So the concern with respect to the MPCA, you're working with them on that. When we built the new wastewater treatment plant, we try to abide by the standards that the MPCA set. Our contractor, and our city staff, and the council was all intricately involved to ensure that we comply as we move forward with that $19.2 million wastewater treatment plant that we put into play. Once it was completed, it wasn't a month that we know we don't meet the standard. Now they changed the standard. So that was a grave concern. So the former mayor and a councilor, myself, they had to go down to the MPCA to get an extension on, meeting these standards, mercury and other things. So this pilot program was welcome, I think, by us early on. To continue with the pilot project, I don't have a concern about. I think that it's prudent to move forward to show a proactive approach in order to us to meet a standard that we consider to be unreasonable, and at that time we couldn't meet. Now there's potential there may be some technology available through your study that may provide that opportunity for us to meet the standard, and that's the goal, to make sure our wastewater is clean. So my second question is, you've been working with People's Services with respect to that, and that relationship has been okay? There's been an issue there?
It's been perfect.
Very good, thank you. And then the cost to the city. Is there a cost other than, I think isn't there some chemicals that had to be added that was borne by the city, wastewater treatment plant in that regard, for some chemical infusion into the wastewater treatment plant, but from your study, is this going to be a cost to the city moving forward?
There should not be any significant cost to the city. We'll work closely with your engineer and with your operational staff. I don't anticipate there's going to be any cost to the city.
Okay, and looking on your map here, you have a circle of some of the different areas. So the question for us is, from our perspective, I think, is that we want to make sure we keep our thumb on the pulse of the legal consequences with respect to this, if there are any. It wouldn't be from people's services or from the city or from probably your study that you're moving forward. But again, I revert back to the MPCA. You know, we're dealing with them on some other issues. I want to make sure that, you know, they're very clear, and we're very clear that this is something we're trying to correct and try to abide by the rules and regulations that have been set. So I think I'm satisfied with that and the answers that you provided, and I look forward to some additional discussion about that. So let's move over to, we'll go left to right first, Councillor Baraboo.
Good morning, and thank you very much for coming. Just a little history. My background has been 40 years as a pharmacist, so chemically and all that stuff, I know exactly what you're doing. My question is, with your agreement with the MPCA, did you get the information exempting us from certain things of the city in writing, or is it just verbal? Do you have any legal documents from the MPCA saying that they're not going to interfere with what our current process is, or did they just give you a verbal? Because I don't trust them come hell or high water, to be honest with you, because of things they've done before. They insisted in the past that we do a bypass with a piping 4 miles to dump effluent into the West Two Rivers. They've been going through Manganika Lake, which was filtering out everything, and they said you can't do that. But of course, filtering through a lake that has tremendous growth for wildlife, which it is, it's a duck sanctuary. They found out when they tested the other end, there wasn't any sulfate or anything left because that's a plant growth product also. So they dumped the pipeline that they wanted us to put around at millions of dollars. I do not trust them. They have not taken a look at the scientific studies on sulfate whatsoever. They keep jumping around. There's many studies out there showing this 10 milligrams per liter is nuts. That the wild rice grows and other entities. In fact, UMD did one of the studies and it was all underwater. Well, rice doesn't grow all underwater. It comes up, and when it comes up, it's a whole different standard for what kind of sulfates affected, like sulfide. You can eat sulfides. Medications all have sulfides. A lot of them have sulfides in them, and it doesn't harm a human being. And they showed studies. So I want to make sure, from my perspective as a counselor, that you have dotted all your I's and crossed your T's with the MPCA, because I do not trust what they do. Because they come in with these standards. The mayor is correct. They come in when we've completed stuff and they want you to change all these standards without really any scientific studies in some cases. Science takes precedent as far as I'm concerned. And you guys are doing a good job with your science. I can tell you that right now. And I want to see this continue.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry, please continue.
Quick comment.
Yes, thank you.
And that is that the concerns you have are ones we share, and if you would like us to approach MPCA about getting a written document that says they consider this an experiment and not a modification, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, I would appreciate that, because that's actually what I'd like to see. So they can't come back in while you're in the middle of your study and say, hey, the City of Virginia, you can't continue with this study. I want this study to continue until you get, and I've been through some of these studies when I was in college, where they go, a long time ago, of course, for me, but where they do increasing volumes and everything like that, and I want to see this completed where the volume gets close to where our volume is coming, if everything is proving out good as you titrate up. So thank you. I would appreciate that if you could do that for us.
Yeah, we just don't want our permits to be affected, so thank you. Councillor Freely, and then we'll go over to Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, well, thank you again for selecting our wastewater treatment plant for study, and because of the unique nature of the logistics of it, I guess, to some degree. The one thing that I did hear, though, that perked my ears a little bit was the accumulation of sediment that would have to be stored then, and then I'm assuming disposed of in some fashion, and I'm just wondering if we would need to be permitted for that, and if the storage would be how long of a time, or would it be trucked away, or just, I want to clarify what that volume would be and how we would take care of that, because it wouldn't be already discharged treatment.
What we would end up doing is the solids that were generated, and there will be solids because what we're doing is we're precipitating the sulfate with the barium. That'll be taken off to one side, and most of it will be recirculated back within the system to act as seed to drive our reaction. But part of that has to be wasted. We'll take that, put it in a 50-gallon drum, let the sediment settle out so there's just clear water on top. The clear water will come back. We'll accumulate that sediment, and that's ours.
Okay.
We'll figure out, working with MPCA, how we're going to manage the solids that are generated by this.
You don't think there'll be any permitting necessary for, okay.
It shouldn't affect you at all. It's going to be internal to what we're doing, and we will take care of it we'll be talking, of course, to your operational staff. We'll also be talking to the regulatory community. But that's our problem, not yours.
Okay, and written correspondence and approval by the MPCA, like Charlie says, I think would be significant for this project to continue on the way it has.
We had kept it with them at more of a conversational level, but I think your request is very reasonable.
Thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Johnson.
I just want to say thank you for bringing this to us. You know, it's work that could lead to revolution, especially in Minnesota when it comes to wastewater treatment. So what happens when this is successful? So you're able to demonstrate that you can do the sulfates, whatever it is, at 2,000 gallons a minute. What's next for you? Does it get patented and marketed, or what's the future? No patent. So because it's already here, does that mean we'll just get to keep using it? And
I don't know if it'd be patented or marketed or what. My reaction to what you just said was me, but that's not my decision. The next step is really, right now the state has a requirement, and the only technologies that came to the forefront when they had a study done on what are practical ways to remove sulfate were incredibly expensive. And so what we set forward to do was to identify and prove a technology that would be inexpensive for the community. Without knowledge, okay, but as an engineer just making a guess, looking at the treatment plant that you currently have down there, the vast majority of what we're doing in our pilot, you could probably currently do in your treatment plant without any additions or changes.
I understand, yeah.
That isn't as straightforward as it sounds, because it would change the character of your solids, which might change the regulatory response to those solids. But those are all things that are kind of down the road. You know, as you look at what's going on with the regulation itself, the regulation that was proposed was pushed back, and we're probably looking at a fairly long window to revitalize that regulation and bring it forward again. Right now, the state just doesn't have any weapons in its arsenal. And so what we're doing is we're trying to provide the state as a whole with some way to treat this that doesn't break the bank. Where's it going to go? It's going to go on the shelf until there's a regulation that drives it. When will that happen? Nobody knows the answer to that question.
I'd like to speak as a layperson quickly. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. A layperson, which really kind of encroaches into elected officials' position, is that my family historically has harvested wild rice for decades. Sulfate has never been or affected the wild rice crop at all. The only three things that does: too much water, not enough water, too much wind. Those are the three things that affect wild rice. And you look in western Minnesota, you look at the lakes over there that doesn't have sulfite and sulfur, they can't grow wild rice. So from an emotional perspective, I think this standard is way too severe, because I don't think the science is, of all the places that we've all been to, that really supports the fact that this is really a standard that needs to be made in order to save wild rice, because it has never been a problem before. You know, you can argue over the years, you know, there's more discharge, but not in this area. Maybe in southern Minnesota in the industrial areas it goes, and picking our wastewater treatment plant to move forward with that because it's a newer plant is a welcome pilot project we have, and I hope I'm confident we'll continue moving forward with this pilot study. But I just wanted to hear that out, because I think it's a standard that's unreasonable based on the other standards set forth for other industries. So thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess just to add on top of that, so this regulation is specifically about wild rice, is that correct?
Okay, let's back up 2 steps, because I'm an engineer and I tend to be really focused and narrow. So for me, this is about removing sulfate from water using a technology. But having said that, back to your question, the thing that drives this technology, as George said, is that the drinking water standard for human consumption is 250 milligrams per liter. There is no technology currently available that was generated for the purpose of removing sulfate down to this level. Minnesota's it. I mean, we're the leaders. And because we're the leaders, we're in a position where we either take something off the shelf that'll work, like a reverse osmosis membrane, and deal with the expense of getting rid of the reject water, which kind of surprised us all, was about 10 times as much as the RO part of it. Or we find another technology that's more manageable. So that was and is our goal, is to find an economically more manageable technology than nanofiltration or reverse osmosis. The other issues, you know, just kick me and call me an engineer, but the other issues are peripheral to my world, because I'm really pretty narrow.
I actually find it fascinating. I really, just in studying your, what you're doing here, I think my dad worked for the city of Hibbing in the wastewater department, and so I know a lot. Over the years, I've grow up in that influent and affluent. But anyway, I just, in going back with the wild rice, so how much is harvested, like south of where we are located? Is there a lot of wild rice harvested south of us?
Maybe a little ways. But you know, by the time you're down to the Twin Cities, there's no significant wild rice as a part of the general ecosystem. You know, you might, if you go down the Mississippi River, you may find a little alcove with a stand of wild rice here or there, but no.
Not a lot.
I mean, it's us. It's up here in the North Country.
Because once you hit the Laurentian Divide, then it flows north. Is that correct?
I'm going to look at George, because I
Yeah,
don't have a clue.
there's actually 3 different watersheds, one that goes down toward Lake Superior, one that's the Mississippi watershed, and then one that flows north and eventually up into Hudson's Bay.
So are we working on what portion of that because that seems to be part of that concern of where it's flowing?
My understanding is the regulation as it was proposed before it was sent back, statewide.
Statewide. Okay. Well, I wish you the best of success. I think this is fascinating, so good luck to you, and thank you for coming to us.
Hey, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Freely.
Do we need a motion for the continuation?
We will need a motion for the continuation of the pilot program, yes.
And I would, if it's timely, I would make that motion for the continuation of the study regarding sulfate concentrations at our wastewater treatment plant.
A motion by Councillor Freely to move forward. I'm sorry, please continue.
Through NRRI and UMD.
Thank you. A motion by Counselor Freely to continue with the pilot program through NNRI, supported by Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Johnson.
You're up and running down there. Would you let us know? Could we come and see what you're doing? If you
Absolutely.
just communicate with Britt when you're at that point, I think it would be very interesting to see a real-world experience. Thank you.
Absolutely, we love to show off.
Have you met with Polymet yet? No, I'm only I'm only joking. Strike that from the record. No. No, Counselor Barnzelli.
Thank you,
Can I
Mayor.
comment on that?
Yeah, please.
I don't think what we're doing would work for Polymet.
Okay, yeah.
And you know why? There's a scale issue, and the fact that you guys are at the concentration you're at makes this very reasonable for a community and for community flows. But if you start dealing with the really larger concentrations and larger flows, I think we'd get in trouble in a hurry with this because we generate so much solids.
Yeah, I just use that, this issue as a conduit to make a political statement, so thank you very much. Counselor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for driving up this morning. And secondly, thank you for bringing us the good news. Like Councilor Baraboo talked about and the mayor, we have had a tough go with this PCA over there. So we're looking forward to this. Thank you very much. Made a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by...
Mayor, I had,
Counselor Baraboo, I didn't see your light on there, I apologize, so.
I just wanted to know, do we need something separate for what I requested for a letter? Do we need a separate motion for you folks?
Add that to this motion.
I can add it to this motion if that's okay, if there's no problem.
Well, with the codicil that,
Yeah, so with they get a exemption letter from the MPCA on this, just add that to
we're
that.
making a motion to move forward with the pilot program.
So I'll make a separate motion for
Let's
the
make a
others.
separate motion for that if we may.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Counselor Baraboo. Okay, there's a motion and a support to move forward to allow NNRI to move forward with additional testing with the pilot program and with Dr. Hanson, Dr. Kai, Mr. Hudak, and their staff. Is there any further discussion in that matter? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Counselor Baraboo.
Yeah, then I would like to make a separate motion that the organization, I don't know what your technical organizational name is, it's just.
NRI.
NRI, okay. Provide us with a exemption letter from the MPCA that will not affect our permitting process.
Thank you. And is there support?
I'll support.
Okay, moved by Counselor Baraboo and supported by Counselor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
For coming. On the next item on the agenda is to approve the contract extension for professional services agreement for city engineering services with SCH.
Morning.
Morning, Matt.
It's hard to believe, but it's that time already again. Time just flies here.
5 years has gone by like nothing?
It's amazing. What I've got in front of you this morning is a request for an extension to our city engineering contract. We've been your city engineer of record now for, I think it's been 7 years now. I've been fortunate to be in that position. And our current contract that we have in place actually expires the end of December. And so I'm just, this is an extension request. Nothing has changed. The contract's exactly the same. Rates are the same. Everything is the same. So I'm more than willing to have any discussions you'd like to have with about it. But I'm certainly I would very much welcome the opportunity to continue to serve you in that capacity. It's really been a lot of good experience and been great working with your staff and working with you as a council and mayor. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Paulson.
I'd like to move the approval of the extension of the contract. And I think with that being said, Matt, you guys do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moved by Counselor Paulson to extend the contract for SCH as our engineer of record. Is there support?
Support for discussion.
Support by Counselor Johnson for discussion. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson.
Can you just clarify, Matt, what the difference is between what you do and what the two engineers at our city hall, like, how does that fit together?
So I act in a support role for those staff members. They take on, Bill takes on a lot of the day-to-day interaction with the community, dealing with various building issues along with Bill Cole. They are not licensed PEs. So I do a lot of the work that requires a license, like work with your municipal state aid type stuff. There's various tasks that we get involved in, that Britt asks us to get involved in, that are, whether it be overload for their staff or just a variety of things we get involved in. It's usually at Britt or Bill's request or the council, again, in a support role for your current staff.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bearable.
Yeah, I had a discussion with Councilor Friedlib earlier about the same question he had asked me about this, and all these projects that we send down on state aid have to be done through a certified engineering firm or individuals, and we do not have that on staff, and it's a requirement by state statute that we have the approval from the state, especially on state aid projects, and we do most of our money right now through state aid with some grant processes, but their firm has done a great job for us. They've helped us on issues when there's been an issue with a local contractor on a road project, whatever it might be that requires engineering. So I am very supportive of continuing with SEH.
Thank you, Councillor Bearable. It's been moved and supported to extend the contract for SEH. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, Matt, while you're here, let's jump down to item number 8, review request for winter suspension for Midway Drive project.
Okay. In your packet, there is a letter from Casper Construction, and actually there are members of Casper Construction here, and I think they, if they could, I think they would like to have a moment to speak with the council, but I can real quick talk about this letter. What you see is a letter from them requesting winter suspension for the Midway Drive project. And then there's also a summary email from me, and in essence, what they're asking for is they've completed all of the work that can be done this year now with the weather turning, with the exception of the remaining light poles that we're still waiting on to get sent from the supplier, which that's been known since the beginning that was going to be the case. So no issues there. It'll get put up here later on this winter yet. But they're just asking to officially suspend the project for the winter, and that has some impact on the contract language, I guess, if you will. It essentially stops the clock from ticking. So if we're talking about completion dates and things like that, it gives them from now until the time they can start up again in the spring, it stops the clock on the contract, I guess, is what it boils down to. So as I said in my memo, I don't see any issues with doing that at this point. They have fulfilled they've done everything they can at this point. They're not going to put sod down now and things like that. So I see no issue with doing that. So with that, I can address this, or if you guys want to vote on it, if you could, I'd give them an opportunity. I think that would be great.
I think we should, if Casper Construction would like to speak, they sure can, and please come forward. And as you're doing so, I just want to say that Midway Drive project has been a challenge for engineering for the city and for Casper Construction. The delays are a result of some significant weather problems, some equipment problems. There's been some trying to locate the underground different utilities that were supposed to be where they're supposed to be, and they weren't there, and from the 1950s. So it was a significant challenge for you moving forward. So not being able to complete the project to the end of the year, I think that was a contributing factor. So I welcome you moving forward. Would you please state your name for the record, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you. My name is Dan Watkins. I'm the project manager from Casper Construction for this project. And yes, as was stated, we did have a few challenges along the way, but I do ask that you grant the winter suspension. We have done everything we can do to this point. The sodding, I understand that was part of it, but most of the sod comes from the southern part of the state. They've been dealing with the same kind of rains that we've dealt with here, and they just couldn't cut sod. But yes, to reiterate, we have reached that point where we can't do anything anymore. The street lights, when our electrical subcontractor gets the necessary parts, they will install the street lights. They're on site. They're just waiting for necessary materials. And then in the spring, we will come back, get the sod down, do the final wear of bituminous pavement and striping, and then any punch list items or cleanup work that needs to be done at that time. So I asked, does anybody have any questions or points of discussion on the project?
I just want to say that, thanks for getting those signs up. Everything's ready to go. The traffic control signs are up there. So the landscaping and the final bituminous is basically with the major issues that you have and some punch list items that have been identified by SCH. And I personally don't have any problem giving you the, stop the clock in order for you, because there isn't much else you can do. And I know the issue with the sod because we tried to order some and unable to get it because of the nature of the weather, trying to get that sod delivered. And they're in high demand because both our sodding companies up here are no longer in business. So thank you. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was exactly about the signage, but I also want to know, with the lighting, where is the lighting that you're discussing or referencing?
I believe it's south of Misabi for about a block. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 streetlights that need to be put up.
Do you think that's going to impede or have problems for winter traffic in that area with visibility?
I don't feel that it will. I do know that in recent conversations with them, they plan on, like, mid-December is when they plan on having those up.
Okay.
But as far as I am familiar with that area, we have the church along there and the one intersection, I believe, with Misabi.
It gets kind of dark back there.
It does, yes.
Okay, so mid-December is kind of what you're predicting?
Yes, that's their tentative date that their materials will show
Thank
up.
you
And
for
as soon
that.
as they show up, they'll be here.
Thank you.
Yes, you're
Appreciate that.
welcome.
And that lighting is between Masaba Drive, as you said, and Borgen Road, that
Correct.
right along the Midway Drive there.
Yes.
And we didn't have any lighting before. Now we're going to have some lighting, which will be a good thing. In the neighborhood, we've been receiving some thank you for finally getting it done, and we're getting some lighting in there, the cleaning up the area there along the right-of-way too. So I think not only the businesses but the residentials have a sigh of relief, and they're appreciative of the work that the city's done and the work that Casper Construction to try to get done as quickly as we can. So thank you. Councilor Baraboo.
My understanding is where the lights used to be, you're going to replace those too on Vermillion and those areas that where they used to be? Because that's a horrible intersection coming off that highway without lighting. Matt, is that going to be done, or is there going to be no lights there?
I believe there is a light at Vermillion, correct? Yeah, right off of 53.
So that's not being replaced, it's just the old ones being left? Is there a new one?
I believe. I believe it's just on the southwest corner of that intersection, or it's southeast.
It's on the other side
Yes.
of the road.
Other side, and same thing on Cuyuna coming in or going out, is there a light down there?
Yes.
Okay, all right, then I'm
And,
satisfied.
and I believe the remaining streetlights, the ones that were slated for removal are still in place, but the city wanted to salvage some parts and pieces from it.
Okay.
Because I believe some of them were converted to LED.
Okay.
So we want the city to get their
That
parts off
answers
of
my
it.
question, thank you.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Baraboo.
And
Okay.
I just want to state one thing about the signs. I do apologize for that. I realized there was a delay, and our subcontractor had staffing issues and whatnot, and I do want to put on record, I appreciate the Public Works for getting out there as fast as they could, for getting those temporary stop signs installed. So I want to thank them for that.
Thank you very much. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, so what is the count of days past the date of substantial completion? How many days are we at? Because I want to make sure that we be specific about that number for you, so that as we look forward to extra costs incurred by us, that we're not counting more days. So I guess that would be my,
Off would be November 6th.
Yes.
Winter suspension would be effective November 6th.
okay. So I would make a motion that we grant the winter suspension as of effective of the date in the letter, to not incur any additional costs to you all, or any additional fines, or whatever the word is.
Okay, a motion by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Freely. Further discussion. Just the completion date, your winter suspension. So, I mean, there's a time frame where you're going to resume that depending upon the weather.
Yes.
Depending upon the availability of sod, right?
Yes.
And of course, availability of the bituminous moving forward. So
That's correct.
we don't have a specific date in the spring, but ASAP, or do we have a specific date in the spring? So ASAP.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank your crew and also Matt. He would come here and brief us probably twice a month,
Yes.
and you guys are great. It'll be better than the highway to the west. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. We do try hard, and we strive for a quality project at the end.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Freely.
No, it's my understanding that over the course of the project, you came upon some unanticipated obstacles that brought things back from anticipated progress. And am I not correct in understanding that we also incurred some additional engineering costs because of that? And I'm just wondering if when you put out a bid like you do, within your bid, do you have some contingencies because of those unanticipated obstacles that may occur that may then befall on you to absorb that cost, either in full or in part? I just would like to know if that's something that, what was the cost of the bid initially? I mean,
I believe it was, our bid, I believe it was 1.806 and some odd cents in dollars.
okay. And so
million.
let's say if we're, $20,000 over that, or that's an incurred cost to us, I mean, should there not be some contingencies? Or, isn't that typical of the construction industry?
Typically, as we're going through the bidding process, especially on SEH's plans, they do a great job with their plans and spec books and everything like that. Typically, we don't put anything really in for contingency. The schedule, we discussed at the pre-construction meeting, the schedule seemed fine at that time, but as you say, the beauty of digging underground, you never know what you're gonna run into, whether it be ledge rock, perched water, utilities. But in short, it's not typical that we add in a contingency amount for anything above and beyond. Usually it's something that's negotiated between the contractor and the engineer, and then eventually the city.
Yeah, just, I mean, from a standpoint of somebody that approves those contracts, like a city like us, I mean, it is, we get so often change orders, you know what I mean? And that's so frustrating at times because it always befalls on the person that's paying for that
Correct,
contract
yes.
as opposed to the contractor themselves. And I just think that from my standpoint, whether that's legit or not, it seems to me when a construction company is going to do a $2 million project, that there should be some contingency on your shoulders to absorb some of that potential unanticipated cost, because otherwise we keep getting hit with that, so.
Right, and that's,
And so much of it is out of your control, I understand
Yes.
that, but you would think that within that bidding process, you could include that to some degree that's
Right.
reasonable within a percentage of that overall cost. Just-
and in some projects we do, this one in particular, we did not. It's a highly competitive world out there. I think there were 8 or 9 bids on this project when it came out, and everything was pretty evenly spaced.
Yeah.
So.
And congratulations on getting the bid, and thank you
Yes.
for the work that you've done
Yes,
to this
and
point.
thank you for working with us on the project. It's been a fun ride.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Freely. It's been moved and supported to grant the suspension for winter effective November 6th. Motion by Counselor Johnson and supported by Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Item number 4 is, I don't need approval today, but it's in your packet. It's the tax abatement agreement between the City of Virginia and SBB Inc. I put it in the packet because I wanted to let everybody know that the school did approve their portion. So we do have the school and the city that approved the tax abatement portion. So we'll complete that grant agreement, or that tax abatement agreement, and have it for your consideration at the next council meeting next week.
Thank you. And the county's on board with
The
that as
county is,
well?
we're moving along with the county. The county has a little bit longer process, but they are very, very, very excited about the project. And so they're very excited. They think they can help too with the tax abatement there as well.
Very good.
Yeah, very good. So that was just an informational one. Number 5, approve the resolution authorizing the sale of 19,615,000 general obligation sales tax revenue bonds, Series 2020A. And we do have Paul Steinman here from Baker Tilly.
Mr. Steinman, been a long time. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Happy to be back. So today, before you is a resolution that establishes the parameters for issuance of this $19,615,000 in general obligation sales tax revenue bonds. I'm on item 5 in your packet. So a couple of key events. We're here today with the Committee of the Whole prior to council meeting adopting the resolution next week. The rating conference will be conducted the week of the 16th of December with your finance folks and Britt and myself and the underwriter. We'll price the bonds on the week of January 13, and then the bonds will be considered by the pricing committee. So that's a little bit different. Sometimes we would sell bonds competitively on the same day that you folks meet, and then bring those results to your meeting that evening. This is a negotiated process with a selected underwriter. So we're proposing that the council consider the parameters resolution, which establishes the outside parameters of the sale. If the sale results are within those parameters, then the pricing committee can go ahead and award the bonds on the 13th, the week of the 13th of January. As is described in the resolution, the pricing committee is mayor, city manager, and finance director. So on the day that the deal prices, we'll be on the phone, myself, the underwriter, and you three, and we'll make a recommendation whether or not to go forward with awarding the sale. So we have the application in for rating with Standard & Poor's. As you know, you have a Moody's rating and a Standard & Poor's rating both. Your Standard & Poor's rating is A+, your Moody's rating is Baa2. So we made a choice to, along with your staff, to go forward with Standard & Poor's, and for obvious reasons. Your rating is higher at the current time with them, and we're hopeful, we have some work to do on this item yet, but we're hopeful that we'll be in the A category with S&P. But we have work yet to do on that issue. The chart on the bottom of the first page just shows you that it's a great time for issuers. The chart at the bottom of that page shows peaks at about the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, and then the market really slid all the way through to about a month or so ago. It's still in the lowest that it's been probably in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years for issuers. So that's good news. That means less interest cost, more money into your project fund, which I know is a high priority. I won't go over all of the other, the post-issuance compliances and things. I'll go to page 3 of my report, which discusses parameter limits. So the resolution will say that your principal amount can't exceed the statutory limit of $30 million, and that the true interest cost post-sale cannot exceed 4%. These are general obligation bonds of the city, so you're pledging your authority to tax if there aren't revenues available to pay debt service. However, we have structured the bonds so that we think there will be revenues to pay debt service. In fact, we've structured the bonds conservatively in consideration of discussions that we've had with your city staff. So you have kind of some variability in your tax receipts over the past 10 years. That's on page, all the way on the last page of our report. Appendix A shows your non-taxable, taxable, and then a 1% sales tax estimate over the last almost 10 years, 8 years. So you've had quite a bit of variability in that number. In 2009, your 1% sales tax would have generated $1,447,000. Today, and then it went up to 2013, and then from 2013 at 1.8, it went down again to 2017, which is the last number we had. So when we structured these bonds, this revenue item is the major constraint with structuring these bonds. We can make a lot of assumptions about how your sales tax revenues may grow or decline. What we are recommending is we'll take the 2017 number and just carry that forward without inflation for 20 years. Is that realistic? Isn't it? I mean, it's kind of a horse apiece. I mean, we could do 1%, but you've seen some declines in your sales tax revenues. You live obviously in an economy that is influenced greatly by outside factors. So our recommendation would be to take the 2017 revenue number, carry it forward. And that's what we're showing you here today. So that produces enough revenues to adequately cover the debt service on the bonds and provide a fairly nice cushion, which are revenues that you still get to retain, which you still can use for your project. And those revenues are shown on my page. What is that page? Page 7. My page 7, on a schedule that says net debt service versus revenue. The far right column shows you a surplus. So that's a surplus that is projected over and above your debt service on the bonds of about 60 to, it looks like, an averaging maybe about 70, 75,000 a year. So those are revenues that you're going to keep that aren't needed to pay debt service on the bonds. So as your sales tax revenues grow, that fund will also grow. So there are points in this process over the next 20 years where you could have another $1 million to spend on your project, or those could be not operating funds, but maintenance funds for other capital projects for your miners project. So that's the approach that we have taken. It's a bit of a conservative approach, but again, anything that is collected in excess of these numbers is still retained by the city for projects. So you aren't losing anything. You're just putting that money aside for future use. So these bonds are $19,615,000 because of what's commonly referred to as a premium on the bonds. We think that the deposit to your project fund will be almost $21 million from the sale of these bonds. If rates are a little bit better, that number will be higher. If the rating comes in at A versus A minus, that may be better. So there are lots of things. Interest is the main issue here that is out of our control, that impacts the sizing of these bonds and how much is left in your project construction fund. And I guess that's an overview, and I'm happy to take questions.
Mr. Steinman, I have one question. The concern, not the concern, but just to clarify, if there's any additional revenues above and beyond what we're expected to collect from the sales tax, that excess money, whatever it is, has to be confined to the miners' project. Is that correct? It can't go to roads and streets. It has to stay within the miners' project, whether it be a maintenance fund or additional costs associated with FEE and all that kind of stuff.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. And I think the word that can't be used, these revenues can't be used for operating costs. So anything over and above that, maintenance, capital costs, another project 5 years from now, or anything related to the miners.
The miners only.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 2, when it discusses the spend-down schedule, do you forecast that we will be able to make that spend-down schedule? And then what is the actual rebate if that's met?
Okay, Councilor, Mr. Mayor and Councilor, the part that I skipped over. She wants to know about the sausage making, and we can definitely talk about that. So So yes, there are a couple of things. You're issuing tax exempt bonds, so the IRS wants to make certain that you're not taking tax exempt money and reinvesting it and making more money than the tax exempt rate on the bonds. So you have a certain amount of time where you can spend down all your proceeds. We said 20, did I say 24 months here? I think we selected a 24-month spend down to give you 2 years to spend the money. And again, if you don't spend all of the money in 2 years, I know this is a large project, so that's possible. There isn't an automatic penalty like you have to give it back or something. It just means that what's left, the investment rate that you receive on the money that's left has to be restricted to the interest rate on the bonds, the bond yield. So again, it's just a way for the IRS to control whether or not you're making money by issuing tax-exempt bonds. So
there's not an actual rebate per se.
the only time that there would be a rebate would be if you took money that you didn't spend and invested it at a rate above the bond yield. Guess what? You can't keep that. You got to give it back to the government. And those are not fun meetings to go to, by the way, but it's happened.
Thank you for that clarification. And I guess to the mayor's point, could that be used on the roundabout or that street that they were projecting if we do go over and above our sales tax collection?
Part of the miners project. Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Johnson.
Just for plain English, can we use that money to pay off our bonds early, and how does that work? From what I'm looking at, and I'm not an accountant, we have to wait several years before we can even think about paying them off early? Or how does it make it simple so that we can understand that even if we're making an extra $500,000 a year the first year, we can't use that to pay off early, or can we?
Sure, Counselor, that's an excellent question. So you don't have the ability to prepay these bonds until we get to what's called the call date,
Okay.
which is 2028.
Right, okay.
So your money, so I know the next natural question would be, why not earlier? We may have additional money, why not earlier? If we go earlier than 2028 on a call date, it starts to cost you money in a higher interest rate on the bonds.
Because the people need to make their money who are borrowing it to us.
That's correct. So we really try to balance and get to a point where you have a call date, but it doesn't cost you anything in interest rate. And when we structured this, we worked with your underwriter, Northland, and we think that together we've come to a date, 8 years, I think that is, where there isn't an interest rate cost associated with it. The other factor is the money that you're going to retain over and above debt service. You may need to do other things with it as well. You can call bonds when we get to 2028, but you also may have maintenance and capital projects that you can spend that money on. So will there be money in 8 years, or won't there be? We don't know for sure, but we thought, let's not make you pay a higher interest rate for an earlier call date.
My other question is there $4 million worth of difference moving forward? Okay. That's where our budget doesn't meet what we have, so. But I like your idea that maybe later on. So thank you very much.
Councillor Friedlieb?
I don't know if this is for you or if this is for Sherry or Britt or both or all, but like, I'm trying to do the math in my mind. So this is the money we're generating from the 1% sales tax towards the MEC project, correct? And it could elicit, what, 21 million, give or take, you're saying, over the course of that time frame, added to the 12 million that we've already been appropriated. So we're at about 32, 33 million. And the last I heard, the project was at 47.2. And that was already 5.7 over, give or take, what we had anticipated originally. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, where we're at with that math and how we're gonna come back down and scale it to a point where we're actually able to afford what we intended to do.
We're at this point, we're at 4 million over, and Kraus Anderson and the architects, the SGW, have been tasked with trying to find how we're going to cut back $4 million.
And be able to utilize the monies that would keep us within budget.
Correct. What they've shown us so far is the dream. This is what everybody wants the miners to look like.
Right.
But we need to come back to reality or find, and later down on the agenda, sponsors, that if it becomes the Wells Fargo Arena, or we start naming the ice sheets, or we do something like that, that somebody wants to kick in the $4 million to get us where we need to be.
So that process in place is to scale it down to the affordable cost from the monies that we'll be generating.
Correct, because by legislative statute, we're only allowed $30 million for this. We can't get any more.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Bearable?
Yeah, Paul, I have a question. Maybe you can or cannot answer this particular question. We saw the outlook from Kraus Anderson and from DWGS for the issuance and cost of bonds, and I asked them this question. They had $8 million in that $47 million. How the heck did they get that when your issuing costs for $21 million are only $300,000? Where did they come up with that stupid figure? I've never seen a figure like that for issuance and legal fees and everything on any bonds we've ever done in this city. Isn't that the savings we can have, Brett?
It's looking like they took it from the interest we pay over the life of the bond is $8 million. So that's what they're using that number from.
So,
Our total interest is at $8,814,951.
so what's that based on? They never did answer my question. It should be based on the cost of the issuance of your bonds. Where
Cost of issuance is 200-something thousand. They just had, Kraus Anderson had wrong numbers in there.
Oh, okay, so then, okay, that answers my
Yeah,
question.
cost of issuance is 295,643.75.
Okay, so that answers my question there.
I think what
Okay.
Kraus Anderson did is they took the total interest we are going to pay over the life of the bond and put that in for cost of issuance.
Oh, which it shouldn't be, actually. Okay.
It's mislabeled, yeah.
That answers my question. Paul, I think you've done a good job on this. I like the perspectives as you put together on this. I've been around with what your firm has done, or you've done, I should say, because you've switched firms now. So you've done a great job for the city over time, so I'm comfortable with this process. Thank you.
And before we move for a motion to approve, just for the council, for the community's edification who's listening on cable access. So the 2017 sales tax revenues, you're basing it on that, and what is that? What was that collection there, just for public's edification?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, the 2017 sales tax number, which is the last number that we have, 1% of that total in Virginia would be, and I rounded up by $4,000, 1.6 million.
Very good, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's not any other questions, I would entertain a motion from the council to move. Okay, is
I
there?
will move the resolution of the City of Virginia, Minnesota regarding the issuance of general obligation sales tax revenue bond series 2020A.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Steinman.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is again an informational one. Number 6, approve the taxable general obligation tax abatement bond for the downtown redevelopment project. And in your packet, we have a proposed schedule of debt service. George Eilertson will be at our meeting next Tuesday, our council meeting, with the banks that have come in. I'm happy to report that the schedule that's in your packet looks like it's not correct anymore. The bank interest rates are a lot better. As Paul alluded to, interest rates are really good right now, so our payments will be a little bit less. But this is the sales tax bond, or sorry, the tax abatement bond for the downtown redevelopment district. VITA will be selling this bond in order to fund the grant program. We are now up to 10 applications that we've received under that grant program. We're still working through them, helping them get their items submitted. And so I just wanted to give the council a heads up, and we're looking at about a $37,000 payment per year out of the VITA levy of $65,000. So they're using about half of their levy to make this bond payment.
Thank you.
Yep. And we'll bring that resolution to the next meeting with the
Thank you, Britt.
final bank selection. And
Very
I
good.
do believe it might be a local bank that we'll be selecting, so wonderful.
Let's hope so.
Yes. And the next item on the agenda is number 7, approving the US EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant Application and the willingness to take the role of fiscal agent for the project. We've been doing this for a couple of years, Sherry?
We have, yep.
And so far, I believe we have 7 or 8 cities that are partnering with us in the coalition.
Very good. They have projects that would be affected by funding from the brownfield. Counselor Johnson.
Mayor, Sherry, is there any administrative fees that we collect from this?
Yes, the current Brownsfield City grant is closing here in December, and both cities, Evelyn and Virginia, there was enough in the grant to pay each of us a little over $10,000.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I know you put a lot of work into it, so I would move the resolution approving the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Brownfield Assessment Grant application and indicate our willingness to take a role as a fiscal agent.
Moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Counselor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Bearable.
Yeah, just one quick, this has been a great granting program. We've gone through, Britt, 2 cycles now of the grants, and it's been a significant amount of money, and Virginia has been fortunate to have projects that have been through this Brownfields grant. We've received quite a bit of money to further projects within the city of Virginia, so I'm very supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Britt, maybe next 1 or 2 items, we could take a quick, short break. Okay, thank you. Can we do it now? Would that be, is there anybody in the audience here that needs to make a presentation? They all do. They all do. Can you bear with us just for like 5 minutes? Thank you. Let's take 5 minutes. Okay, we'll suspend the council meeting for 5 minutes for a short rest break.